instantly recognized that this is an amazing stuff. This is sculpture. This is genius. And they, Charlie Coles, I don't know if Coles is still remembered. Sweet man, very open, giving, went to lots of my own talks. Charlie Coles owned an art gallery, modern art. He fell in love with Orr's work, collected it, had about 30 pieces. Coles, Irving Blum, I don't know if he's still remembered, but these guys are hotshots at the time in the 1980s, 1970s. They were the New York art world. Blum introduced Orr to his artists. He showed it to Andy Warhol. Andy wanted it, didn't want to pay for it. I'm rambling. I'm telling you too much. I'll never get the thing. I once outbid Andy. I was at the back wall, turned around, this little guy with a shock of white hair, and I'm outbidding Andy Warhol. He was what's known in the trade as a schnorrer. But he managed to collect about 30 pieces. I'm never going to finish this talk on time. Never. Yeah, my wife's going like this. All right. Jasper Johns collected it, and if you know Jasper's work, he painted Orr's pots floating in the middle of his paintings. And once Jasper did it, Andy wanted Orr as well. Robert Rauschenberg collected Orr. Everybody was eager. That's how much of an impression he had. Immense. Now I press this one. Now this, of course, is not Orr. Orr was known as the Mad Potter of Biloxi, and this fellow was also a little touched. This is painted out the window of the sanatorium. And what you see is color, brilliant, amazing color. And you will see that with Orr. Energy captured forever. You stand in front of this and it's exciting. That's what you'll see with Orr. He had very little formal education. Orr had less. They are kindred souls. They are living for their art, and I am talking far too much. Here's George. His father was a nasty old man, the first blacksmith in Biloxi. Did well, bought land, built a house, and essentially tortured his son into being a blacksmith when he was a little guy. Orr hated him for it, and as soon as he could, watch the muscles. Orr is famous for those bulging muscles. The long mustache ended up being this long. Salvatore Dali was an imitation. Why did he do it? Both for his own soul and to attract the tourists. He's in Biloxi. Nobody's in Biloxi. But he's got the tourist trade. And that will always work on his mind. He will always appeal to the tourists. Okay, George. This is the kind of stuff that he would make. Before he became a potter, he was a roustabout, hated his father, immediately left as soon as he was in his late teens, took a dozen jobs, was a sailor for a while, broke, came back, lived in the house, commented that he didn't have to pay rent. In 1879, he gets a letter from Joseph Fortune Meyer. Meyer's a family friend, an old family friend, about 10 years older than George. Come to New Orleans. Meyer was a folk potter in New Orleans, very competent. His father had been a potter, Again, I'm rambling, I apologize. Maya offers them $10 a month and learn the trade. George goes, spends 2 years learning everything he can from Maya, and then decides he's going to fly off and see every pottery in the country. Up the Mississippi, he goes to the Anna Pottery, up the Mississippi, over to New York, down the Hudson, through the Shenandoah Valley, learning everything he could about sustaining a business. This is in the late 1800s. Women in the country, housewives, bought the stuff they needed, mugs, jugs, pots, everything from the local pottery. That changed at the end of the century with mass production and the railroads in Ohio, but at this moment, there are potteries all over the place. George works here for a few weeks, works there for a few weeks, comes back, and he's now a folk potter. We are going to see the transition from folk potter to art potter to ceramic artist. He sells his ware to the housewives from a cart, and at the same time, he's got only in the backyard, his parents let him build a kiln. He builds a kiln, he builds a grinding apparatus for grinding the clay. Remember, he's a blacksmith. He makes the ironwork himself. And for about a year and a half, he, on the side, makes 600 pieces of pottery with the aim of bringing them here to a World's Fair in New Orleans. He brings them, and as his luck would have it, at the end of the fair, they're all put on a wagon. He hires a teamster, and the teamster steals the whole lot. He goes back to Biloxi and starts all over again. But the important thing about this is that there are two professors of art, Ellsworth and William Woodward. They were educated in the idea that companies, factories, needn't be the kind of factories that everyone had typically. People could work there in a clean environment and do art. People, in particular women. Why? Because the Civil War had killed so many men that the women in the country needed some support. Young women had to work, and they had to have some dignity. Perhaps they could decorate stuff. And so the Woodward brothers taught art free classes for the women in the South, and they were extremely popular. Now remember, Joseph Fortune Maya has written to Orr, has taught Orr how to be a potter before he goes on his trip around the country. The Woodward brothers buy a little establishment in the French Quarter, hire Maya to set up a pottery, the New Orleans Art Pottery. Art pottery, it's important, art pottery. They're going to make pots and bring them to the ladies who they can teach how to do art. And the ladies, in a clean environment, they're not digging clay, they're not throwing the pots, they could decorate. They could learn a trade. Maya wants the young buck with the muscles to come and help him dig. He's got to dig the clay, and Maya offers George the opportunity to work and make a steady living, which he wasn't. There's George. Where's my laser? This is a high-tech talk. Heart check. Beep. No way. Nah, it gets lost. George is in the front. You could recognize him by the whiskers. He's throwing the big pots. He's got muscles. He can throw a big pot. That's Meyer in the back on the left. My associate and colleague will be pointing. This painting ends up at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. In any event, George is now making pots. This is what he made for himself. This is not what the young ladies were making. George is into dragons. He's got a dragon fetish. All right. This is the kind of thing he made. Elegant, but hardly memorable. In 1888, he's going back and forth from New Orleans to Biloxi. He has started a family. One of his kids is sitting in the front. It's a little hard to see. That's George. The wagon he made. He went out, cut down the trees, had them sawed into logs, and built the damn thing himself. Amazing. He dug the clay on the Chuticabuff River. I went down the Chuticabuff River to see the clay. The whole thing is a wonderful story of a man himself doing everything. You can see the pots lining the little portico. Soon there's one way up on the roof. This is a rather scrawny folk pottery. 1888. The kind of things he would make. He learned to rip off already made things. He made molds. So that's a molder piece. This one, the big brown one, is one of his. He learned that from Maya. The blue one is, I think, Grover Cleveland on one side and his wife on the other. That's a little throne piece. The folk potter is not yet an art potter, but he is going back and forth. Here he is with Maya. Again, at the New Orleans Art Pottery. They're going back and forth. He's going back and forth. Back and forth for what? He's having children in Biloxi. Lots of children. Unfortunately, he has 10 children. Unfortunately, the first 3 babes die before they're 5. Those are nasty times. No penicillin. Dreadful. He's heartbroken. He's got muscles to bulging, and yet he's an exquisitely sensitive character. With very little education, he writes poetry. He writes all sorts of weird stuff because he can't spell. And since he can't spell, he makes up words. Has a marvelous time. Anticipates. I remember being in a gallery in the 60s, 70s. The gallery was filled with written stuff. Just words. He was doing this 100 years before. Here he is, Woodward painted him. He posed for artists. Across the street from the New Orleans Art Pottery, they rented a building and gave classes in art. George is surrounded by art. It opened his eyes. It changed his life. So we go from being a folk potter to being an art potter. And Biloxi is now the art pottery. Puts up a big sign. He made a living painting signs all over Biloxi. But that's what he looked like. In fact, I gave this watercolor to the museum. My wife and I we've been researching war for 50 years. Fell in love with him. Here he is, proud as can be. He loved photography. I have to stop talking. He loved photography. Whenever he could, he had a photograph shot. And as you can see, Art Potter, the little sign. The stuff is cluttered, it's old-fashioned, it's thick. I even have a piece of the handle picture, and it's a big, clunky, heavy thing. It was screwed onto the pot. So he wouldn't have been remembered if he never got any farther than this. But he did. Now, 1893-ish, the place is overflowing. Two of his children at the floor there, Leo and Asa. Asa would soon pass away. George is proud as can be. He goes off to Chicago, to the White City, to the Columbian Exposition. He didn't miss a World's Fair. If he could manage it, he went to every World's Fair, every show of pottery. He was not a country bumpkin. Inspired in Chicago by the American Impressionists. Child Hassam, Mary Cassatt, they were all there. He saw them all because he went to the art building to see the painting that Woodward had done of him. So we know he certainly went and saw he saw all of the color that was beginning to surge into art. In America, America had been on the somber side since Lincoln's death. And then at the height of his folk pottery, I pushed the button and now we pray. This is the kind of stuff that he made. Tedious, skilled, but tedious. The place burns down. And it wasn't his fault. It wasn't even his fault. The Bijou Oyster Saloon on the main drag in town caught fire at 2 o'clock. The fire spread to the Opera House. They had an opera house in Biloxi. It then burned down the fire engine. They didn't have an engine. They had a thing they schlepped. And the sparks blew up north and burned down his family home and burned down his pottery, collapsed the kiln that he had built himself. Everything he built himself. Total wreck. There he is. I'll use my pointer. Excellent. With 2 of his kids. Now he's going to become, he's gone from a folk potter to an art potter. Now he's going to become a ceramic genius, a modern, the first, probably the first in the world, but the first modern ceramicist. This is the kind of thing that came out of the fire. Whoops. I got too enthusiastic. He sells chits to the locals, redeemable for a pot once the pottery is rebuilt. And he collected enough money to build it. That pagoda on the top, he learned when he was in Chicago. There are lots of state buildings that had viewing platforms. That's a viewing platform. The spikes up in the air are for lightning. So the lightning didn't burn the place down. There's George. He built this house next to it. And you could see, that's the family home. You could see this thing from miles. Anywhere in Biloxi, the tourists could see the place and meander down. That's all they could do was fish and swim and see the mad potter of Biloxi performing at the wheel. Trinkets, trinkets, trinkets. That's an inkwell. An artist, how appropriate, an artist. He's got brushes and paint. And of course, the occasional inkwell that's a Lincoln cabin. A Lincoln cabin, he had lots of variations. This one's unfinished. This has a story that I'll give you the abbreviated. You want to hear the abbreviated version? Yes. This is offered to me 3-4 decades ago. The guy wanted $30,000. I didn't have $30,000. $30,000. He was insane. Next thing I see, 3 or 4 years ago, it's at Sotheby's on a shelf. It's in the catalog. It's on a shelf in Sotheby's with a few minor pieces of ore, and the shelf collapses. And this blows up into 1,000 pieces. I should have bought it. Should have hocked the house. I called Sotheby's and said, will you sell me the pieces? No, they were doing some insurance thing. There it is on the bottom. My pointer points to it on the bottom, right above it. Yeah, there it is. This is all recovered after the fire. There he is with his apron on, his mustache. That big piece is 6 feet tall. It's in the museum in Biloxi, unglazed. The handles are gone. If you study each photograph, you can watch the handles deteriorate and mark out the date. This must be after that because the handle on the left is gone. That's the kind of crazy stuff my wife and I did for years and years and years. The big pots on the top vanished. We have never seen them. They probably came north, and Orr's great-great-grandchildren. I was having dinner in Biloxi with the family, and Dickie came over, Dickie, the great-great-grandchild, and he said, oh, I had a gang of kids, and we found boxes of pottery in the junkyard, and we had BB guns. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. BB, my heart. BB guns. That's why you never see the top ones. Some of them, the littler ones, survived. This is now Orr the sculptor, or the ceramicist, making stuff you've never seen before. No one's ever seen before. This is 1 foot tall. That's only a few inches tall. Look at the glazes and the shapes, because his glazes are amazing and his shapes are amazing. Oh, where'd we go? Fire in a hole. Yeah, this. The only reason I want to say something about this is because he will use this visual metaphor over and over again. He's going to let you calmly watch the body of the piece in a classical, simple shape, and then explode on the top. And though you may not appreciate it even as you watch it, it creates a tension, an internal tension. You look up and you look down, and they fight with each other. Clever beggar. Oh, I must go back. He is capable of making the sweetest pots. Remember, this is a blacksmith with a gentle hand. That thing, how thick is it? Look at the top rim. It is circularly symmetric. There's an axis that goes down the middle of it, and it's discontinuously symmetrical. And we like that. Our souls appreciate symmetry. and he will play with your head. Think of Vincent, the colorist. Nobody did this. Nobody had the nerve. That's why the contemporary potters hated oil. I love this thing. I don't know where it is. It vanished into some collector. But this is the kind of thing, a straightforward body and then an explosion. She's very delicate. Here he is. Hello, George. I push the button. Yeah, exactly. It's an explosion. And there's Garth Clark, the critic, many years ago, likened the handles to the ironwork, the tendrils of iron. He's probably right. This is split down the middle in the inside. The left is a teapot, and the right is a coffee pot. And just to show that he could make lovely, simple things. How about this? You ever see an explosion of color? George is a color. Think of the Van Gogh, Starry Night. This is George's Starry Night. This piece sits in California. It's a foot across, a big pot. One of my favorites, this is in the Biloxi Museum. It is not a regular coffee pot. It is what Whitney and I were curating a show, and David came over and I said, this is a Cadogan. And he said, no, Gene, it's a Cadogan. The top is sealed. Doesn't come off, you fill it from the bottom. It's got a tube inside. You fill it, I could leave this on for another 5 minutes. California, that's where it is. This is exquisite. The Met got this as a gift. Ellison gave this little thing, the little pustules. If it's cooled too fast, the pustules collapse and make little circular things. If it isn't, if it's cooled just right, they stay as bulges, and you just want to go over and go like this. Cost you $1,000 a pop. This started as a bowl. It then became a crema. All love this configuration. You'll see a dozen different variations. What I like is the rainbow. You can see the rainbow here and the rainbow up there. That's due to a multi-layer dielectric film that's causing interference patterns. The film settled on the pot during the firing. Whether he could control it or not, who knows? But it comes up every once in a while. I suspect he controlled everything. You ever see anything like this? 100 years ago, 120 years ago. Amazing, utterly amazing. It sat in the attic. If you thought sculpture. No utilitarian purpose. This is on a table in the Starship Enterprise. I'm getting a signal I'm talking too much and I gotta go faster. All right, I'll go faster. He loved to take temperance photographs. He wasn't a big drinker. He just had fun doing it. What's his name? Toulouse-Lautrec did these double exposure photographs as well. George is not standing on his head. He's standing on the pot. The photograph's upside down. The hat's glued. The bucket is glued. You want to see the pot he's standing on? Who would stand on that? Spectacular. Go faster. Charlie Coles owned this at one time. No lip. He's already settled this utilitarian versus art nonsense. No lip. How about this one? He turned the lip up. Even a fool knows you can't pour out of this. It's gorgeous. I love this one. Tendril handles, the whole business. This was made for the W. Griffith, who was the director of the Art Museum in Detroit. He was given a little nail and inscribed his name on the bottom, but was called away and never collected the piece. It now lives in California, soon to be back in New Jersey at auction. This is a kick. I was going to say kick-ass, but I won't. This is an amazing pot. It's about 12, 13 inches tall. And if you get bored with this, you can always turn it around. It's just as exciting on this side as it was on the other side. Reticulated loving cup. Every one of these things has a story, which I cannot tell you, because he won't let me. Larry won't let me. This kind of thing has never been done in all the history of ceramics. Here's another one of those nice little classic bottoms, exploding top. Yeah, isn't that fun? About 14, 15 inches tall, owned by two of the great-great-granddaughters in Biloxi, who parted with it recently. They called it the water fountain. Big bowl. I love this. I don't know who owns it, but it can sit in the palm of your hand. It's a little treasure. Now compare it to this. This is circularly symmetrical, so your eye sees all the tumult on the top, but your eye relaxes compared to the previous one. This has a shark skin finish to it. It's matte. George tried everything. Every one of these slides deserves 20 minutes, kids. Bold, amazingly gutsy. He kept his whole collection. That's purple on the outside, green on the inside. Just wonderful. And this, of course, goes without saying. Jelly apple. This is restful, again, not because it doesn't have a lot of work, but because it's symmetrical. You twist it 5 degrees, another 5, and it repeats itself. So your brain has a happy time with it. It isn't causing distress. This, on the other hand, I could leave this up for, but Larry will come over and him. Yeah, oh my God is right. This is the front side. The back side, she is gorgeous. On the back side, it's a pale blue. I don't have to say a thing. When did Jackson Pollock invent splattering? 100 years later? And this, of course, is manly. So he goes from these feminine delicate, wonderful, symmetrical, twisted pieces to this manly, abstract expressionism. He's abstracting before Voulkos was born. I don't know if you know Peter Voulkos. Before Voulkos was born, George was playing the same game, letting his soul out into the pottery he was making. George's reptiles all have wonderfully goofy faces. You can just begin to see it. Here's one where I show both sides. Again, if you get bored with one side, you get the other. Again, a peaceful piece. Nobody's agitated by this. It has its own symmetry. But this is abstract expressionism. He pounded the hell out of that piece. And yet it works. He's got such a good eye. He can torture the hell out of the piece on the bottom, leave you enough space to find peace in the upper third, and the whole thing works. Here's George, all of his burned babies. He threw nothing. How can you throw away a burned baby? Killed babies. There's a couple of 1,000 pots that were cremated in the fire. Delicate. You guys like the symmetrical ones better? I hear a little, How about this? This will cause you grief. Wonderful thing, exploding. The nerve the guy had. This is about 1.25 feet tall. I won't say a word. These are brothel tokens that George made. Of course, New Orleans, somebody read it. New Orleans was the center of whatever. And George, the red light district was famous. So George made his own brothel tokens. If you haven't read any of these yet, you missed your opportunity. Oh, wait, we have to go back. One more click. There he is. There's George. If you have spent decades with a magnifying glass, you know all of these. This is blue, bright blue. This Katrina took. It is now in Poseidon's castle. Here's the fountain before it got pink. This is pink. Ellison gave this to the Metropolitan. This is in California. It's green. This is a gorgeous red thing. This you will see. I'll show you this one. It's bright red with splashes of blue. This guy, 2 trumpets, rent right through it to tell you, don't use this for holding flowers. And the one in his hand, we'll look at in a second. If I can operate this, my fingers are too big. That's what he's holding. Made in a wood-fired kiln in Biloxi, where he wouldn't sell, he would give all of his work to a museum if they'd keep it intact. A museum would keep it intact, or a single buyer. But he wouldn't spread the pieces around. How could you do that? There were no color photographs. There were no galleries that would keep record of where the pots went. So he put prices on it that no one could afford. Pay for it in his weight in gold. Now, at this point, he's gotten mixed reviews. The other potters in the country hate his work. Why? Because they're making pots. He's making sculpture, they're making pots. They don't understand what he's doing. But a critic, a powerful critic, an outstanding collector named William King, writing for the Buffalo Express, setting up the ceramics for the World's Fair in Buffalo, discovers ore communicates with him. King writes extensively about ore. This is Susan Frackleton, who reads King's work. She goes and visits ore and works with him. This is a page from a booklet that she prepared for a show that she was doing in Michigan, an annual show. And, oh, I want to go back there just for a second. You see this central trumpet pot? That'll be towards the finale. It's incredible. That thing with the trumpet on the top. It's incredible. So keep it in mind, kids. Here she calls him on the second paragraph. Mr. Orr is an erratic genius, wholly devoted to his potter's wheel. So now he's recognized, he's been recognized by the cognoscenti. The editors of journals recognize the genius, but his contemporary potters don't. And that's not altogether surprising. He's a socialist, and he makes this as a trophy to be given to the year's outstanding socialist. These are a collection of pots that have not yet been glazed. I'll show, I remember this one is in New York. It's spectacular. This I almost got my hands on. This is that little blue one without the lip. This is a gorgeous gunmetal black thing that you'll see towards the end if they don't hook me off the stage. Georgie and his dotage. In 1903, George decides that he's not going to glaze anymore. He's a shape man. He's only going to make shapes. So for the next 7 years, until he closes down in 1910, he's only going to make shapes. The two little apertures at the top are holes that he punched into the piece with his fingers, knowing that 100 years later he would inspire Vulcus. Energy forever captured. You could see Starry Night, Van Gogh's Starry Night, whirling around. Graceful. They were all bowls to begin with. Isn't that sweet? We're in the home stretch. I got to go faster. Faster. That's about a foot across. In 1910, he gives up the shop to his sons, who are hard driving fast. It's the age of speed. Motorcycles, motorboats, cars. That's a 1910 Cadillac. They rip the pagoda off. They make a big hole so you could drive the thing in. The cars. There's George on his motorcycle. He would go down the street, the main drag, past Christian, had a trolley track. He'd put the wheels in the trolley track and raises both arms as he flew down the street. the mad potter of Biloxi, was a little, I suspect, by now he's, who knows, Alzheimer's, dementia, weird to begin with. They say the family carefully boxed up the pots, baloney. They threw them into boxes where they rattled in the attic. Whenever a train passed, whenever a car engine blew up, this is what happened to the pots. Here's George. His brother and two sisters were suing to get the property that was left to his wife, and he became his wife's lawyer. That was insane. So if you take the time to read the sign, which I will not let you do, he's moaning and groaning against lawyers and doctors and everybody else. That's a float, a Mardi Gras float. Come on, George. This shot I'm showing you was taken in the attic of the guy who bought all of the pots, as many as he had access to. Brought them up to New Jersey, spent a year with his wife. His name's Carpenter, Jim Carpenter. He's gone to heaven. Jim was a tough character. I'll tell you all about Jim sometime. In any event, this photograph shows you a whole different side of ore. These are about, 13, 14 inches tall. You'd never imagine that they were made by ore. The date on it is 72, April 72. A guy named Blasberg, who was a friend with Carpenter, took a whole load of photographs. His wife gave them to me. Here's Georgie. We're in the home stretch, kids. Here we go. You think this is a vase? A vase? And then he punched a hole in it to make sure you didn't misunderstand. Isn't that incredible? That's never, no one ever thought of doing anything like that. George the colorist, Starry Night, Screaming. Garth Clark, who was a brilliant writer and authority on pottery, called this the best pot he ever saw. It's about 14 inches tall, and on the body of it, those are George's fingerprints. The glazes, he formulated those glazes. There's a snake on the bottom. That's in California. Need I say a word? Who has the nerve to do this? Reticulated. George was a real patriot. The Liberty Bell. This is about 14, 15 inches tall. 8 inches tall, but delicious. And when you think he only made crazy stuff, look how sweet this is. Here's our blue one with no lip. Here's one with a lip and an explosion of color. Jackson Pollock Revisited. And this one with the little bustle. Larry will show you the sister of this, a blue one that also has a bustle. Where he came up with this, who knows? Blazing. You could have come across this in what, California in the 60s, 50s. It's 100 years old. It's 120 years old. One of my favorites. Shape is amazing. Glaze is amazing. Everything works. Not every pot that Orr made works, but this thing works. And this works. That's the one that was on that top shelf in the black and white photo. You turn this around, it's different. And this is the one that was unglazed on the table. Just delightful. Tall, graceful. Abstract expressionist. Volkers, made in 19-nothing. This is all 120 years ago. Breathtaking. He seems to have ranged everywhere. Come on, I'm pushing a button. A sweet little thing to conflict with the previous slide, or manly slide. The lady, the little girl slide. It's amazing. The range is breathtaking. I'm almost done, kids. New Jersey. This sits on a table in New Jersey. Come on, slide. I'm pushing. I am pushing. This is about 14, 15 inches tall. Glazes. Nothing like that glaze ever was made. Big, tall, red one. This comes from a castle in the 1200s. It was on the mantle over the fireplace. There's a long pause. I push, it doesn't move. The middle of this is deep, deep, deep blue. And now it goes black. Why does it go black? Warum? I could end here. We have a technical failure. Push the button. What are we doing? Resetting? Faulty equipment?
No.
Yeah. I broke it? Well, imagine the most glorious pot you've ever seen. I think there's a good place to end. How am I doing? Am I over time? Anybody got any questions? Because God himself has rendered my talk done. Madam in the back. Biloxi is in Mississippi. It is on the Gulf of America. Bravo.
Okay, I have a question, and also I want to say that we are very fortunate. Gene and his extremely erudite but delightful wife, Carolyn, who's standing in the back, Carolyn Hecht, they will be here this afternoon as well. So you have more opportunity. But my question has to do with the fact that the unglazed pots, nonetheless, what you demonstrate is a great polychromy. How is that achieved? What about the earth?
None of it is scrottled. Scrottling is a technique that many potters used. You take a brick-colored clay, you take a beige-colored clay, you keep them apart as much as possible, don't blend them, and then you turn the piece out of these two globs of clay, and you get striations of color. That's not what Orr did, even though it's said countless times. I've taken broken pots and examined them. They're not a blend. He took his finger, got it in a red clay, and went choop as it turned on the wheel, and decorated them. So they are, in fact, decorated. Okay?
And the source of the dirt, did he not explore different earth?
Oh, sure. Many of the pots are inscribed on the bottom. Clay from New Orleans Street, clay from wherever he was. He'd go to his show, find clay, bring it home. He had something called English clay, a white clay. But for the most part, it was clay from the Chute-Gabuf. If you go to the Chute-Gabuf, the river flows rather quickly, and it carves out the sides, the banks, and you can see red clay and beige clay and gray clay. And he dug it out, loaded it onto a flat floating thing, paddled it down to the landing, loaded it onto a cart with his pony, drove it into Biloxi. Sometimes he stayed in the woods overnight, drove it into Biloxi, ground it fine so there were no lumps, cleaned it, ground it, etc., etc. He did everything himself, and no other potter, as far as I know, in the country did that. Okay?
Perfect.
Perfect. You want to see the last few slides or no?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Then blame them. Oh, there it is. That's the one I wanted to make sure you saw. That's the trumpet one that was in black and white on that stand. What can I say? It's like standing in front of a starry night. You don't have to talk. Just breathtaking. Goofy snake. When you think you've seen everything, this is one of 3 that he made. The first one has little sweet, little separate little things all around it, brown, just like this, same height, same shape. She's buried inside. You see her buried inside? Then the next one is a little bit more tortured, and this one is an explosion. Big. This is bigger than you imagine. Here's our lovely one. She's a lovely little thing, isn't she? Graceful, delicate, thin. And finally, last one. One side, different from the other side. Just spectacular. That's the last one.
To Larry.
Try to be brief. Given Gene's overview for his life and work, in light of the recent mainstreaming of ceramics as fine art in terms of gallery and museum exhibitions, and of course the ever-present art market, how might Worth alone, supposedly Biloxi outsider, who presaged so much of the advanced insider development of 20th century art, how can he be more fairly integrated into the milieu? How do we reframe his life and his work and influence? Now, in the words of Garth Clark, the ceramics dealer and expert, here was perhaps the most brilliant ceramist in America of the 20th century. He knew it. 3 or 4 other people maybe knew it, but he just could not communicate with the community at large. But unshaken by appreciation for his work by the people around him, He was so confident that uh, the future value and the recognition of his work would finally happen, that he kept for posterity all the unsold works, even those damaged by fire. He declared, "I'm making pots for art's sake. I'm making pots for God's sake, for future generations, and by present indications for my own satisfaction. But when I'm gone, my work will be prized, honored, and cherished." In April 1937, there was an article, Primitive Art and Picasso, in the Magazine of Art. And in it, the author John Graham drew upon a major Jungian theme, that of the collective unconscious. And he posited that through the ages, art had generated a durable inventory of archetypic forms and motifs, which perceptive people of past eras and cultures, and even up to the present day, were capable of tapping into. Duchamp himself admitted, "You think you're doing something entirely your own, and a year later you look at it and you see the roots of where your art came from, even without you knowing it." Carl Jung said that creativity has far more to do with the instincts and other mysterious unconscious factors than the conscious will and well-meaning reasonableness. Designer Robert Tannen believed that Orr was probably the first abstract artist in the United States. So could it be that Orr, even with the exposure that he did have to other artists, he was still working in relative artistic isolation? Um, did he tap into this inventory of archetypic forms that reappear in the works of artists of later generations? So let's consider where these motifs that Orr pioneered reappear later. Now, the turn of the 20th century was about reinventing the wheel with technologies of motion, trains, cars, still cameras, and movie cameras. And Orr's pots captured motion with midsections that expanded faster than the top and the bottom, conveying an accelerated sense of motion and speed, just as early 20th century artists were attempting to convey motion and speed in painting and sculpture. Now, the creative rotary motion of Orr's potter's wheel was re-embodied as spiral expressions of energy in works by Marcel Duchamp and Man Ray. By rendering utilitarian pot forms as useless and declaring them art pottery, Orr presaged Duchamp's idea of the ready-made, that by taking a useful object and rendering it useless, you redefined it as a work of art. Now, that the piece on the far right was for mounting a clock into, but when you don't mount the clock into it, it's a big vase form with a giant hole that could never hold water or anything else. And then sort of he did these puzzle cups, which were perforated, and unless you knew the secret of how to hold them, you wouldn't be able to drink anything from them without getting it all over yourself. So it's an interesting sort of confluence. Orr sort of had a pre-data penchant for humor, dramatic, and satirical performances, as Gene has mentioned. And he also had a pre-data-like sense of wordplay or child's play with his children's names, each of which the initials spelled out their first name. And you know, when you want to introduce a new concept or style, it always scares people. So it's always a good idea to introduce it by portraying a traditional subject. In the case of the Cubists, they painted still lives and figures. Orr started out with utilitarian forms, pots, vessels, and he used the oldest means of motion, the wheel, and the oldest material, clay. But he used them in revolutionary new ways. But here you have the whole ensemble: a vase, a teapot, a teacup, a creamer, a sugar bowl, but so radically transformed. in his career and throughout the history of clay was used as to make utilitarian containers or vessels. And diverse cultures from Egypt to Israel to North Africa to Pakistan and around the globe, different cultures made associations equating vessels with woman and woman as vessel. Whoops. And then the Chutacabufa River, where Orr dug his clay, was named by the Native Americans of the area. And in the Biloxi Indian dialect, that river's name literally means broken pot. So as far as like not knowing where your inspiration or sources come from, there it was in his hands as he dug it out of the river. Broken pot, woman as vessel. Then we have the whole notion of the surrealists who created this one sort of tenet of their practice, which was the problem of woman. As Andre Breton described it, the most wonderful and disturbing problem there is in the world. Now, the male surrealists idealized, they idolized, and they objectified woman as their subject, but more often than not, they distorted it, they dissected, they dismembered, or portrayed their idol ideals in half animal guises. In the case of the center figure, there's Max Ernst's mythological figure, which is a bird headed fecund female engulfed with crustaceous growth, flanked by Salvador Dali's female with drawers and Venus de Milo with drawers sculpture. In like manner, we have Rene Magritte with literally breaking down and compartmentalizing woman, flanked by his painting The Rape of 1945 and a later bronze sculpture of the same subject. But unlike the surrealists, Orr had no problem with women. He lived happily with his wife for 50 years and he sired 10 children. As Dr. Hecht outlined, Orr slowly evolved from the creation of utilitarian vessels to use the flesh-like plasticity of his clay to create dozens and dozens of sensuous female vessel forms. Where else does a revolutionary abstraction of a female form reappear as a utilitarian ceramic form, but then recast as art? Surprise, it's Marcel Duchamp. And where else does a revolutionary abstraction of female forms reappear as oil paintings of flowers? Here we have the work of Georgia O'Keeffe, who painted these flower form paintings from the 1920s the whole way through the 1950s. His vivid color schemes resurface in many surrealist works, like this Pavel Chelichew's Hide and Seek. Arshel Gorky introduced loose drip and drizzle color applications that Orr had independently pioneered 50 years earlier. And Gorky composed his paintings with fragmented, suggestively female anatomical gestures. The fragmentation of the female form continued with abstract expressionism of Willem de Kooning, while John Chamberlain rendered another American icon, the mobile vessel form, the automobile, useless and hence art. He reintroduced the idea of sculpture being polychromatic, as Orr did with his vivid glazing techniques, and he bridged sculpture and painting, abstract expressionism, and pop art. After encountering abstract expressionism at Black Mountain College, the aforementioned California ceramist Peter Volkos adopted the fragmentation of the utilitarian form. His fellow Californian, Ken Price, spent a career developing crackle-blistered color glazes and finishes on biomorphic forms. And here we have 4 of Ken Price's forms flanking 2 of Orr's ceramic pots with the vivid crackle finish. Now, Orr pioneered an aesthetic based on physically collapsing and fragmenting the vessel or female forms. He offered whole new ways of thinking about form, color, and content. Now, these forms are really incredible. I mean, look at the four of those at the bottom. What's amazing about those four pots is that they aren't four different pots. They're four different views of exactly the same pot, showing how complex Orr was able to create form thinking through his hands. He wasn't a guy who sat at a table with a bunch of paper and a ruler and theoretical texts thinking about, well, what should I do that would be brand new? He thought with his hands and with the clay. And it's, as many artists do, theory and interpretation come later. Now, another LA friend of Ken Price's was none other than the architect Frank Gehry. Robert Tannen gave Gehry his first Orr pot, and Gehry began to collect them. They gave Gehry license to treat his forms, his vessel slash container slash building forms, with a more plastic approach than all previous architecture. And here on the right, we have an experiment of Gehry's with a cast porcelain pot form. And then at the bottom, we see how Orr's work liberated Gehry to think in terms of generating an ensemble of forms to create a building by crumpling paper, literally, over top of a flat slab that defined, like, here's the footprint that I have to fit a building into. And this is how he conceptualized Bilbao and many of his later works. So, as Gene sort of mentioned, Orr experimented with an abrupt combination of two or more distinct forms or materials or geometries into one larger design. And this was later to be redeveloped by Gehry and others into the postmodern concept of the colliding grid, where you didn't lay out an entire building based on one coherent grid structure, but rather you laid out different parts on different grid structures and let them integrate. And here we have an example of, as Gene sort of said, we have the symmetric vase form, typical traditional thing, but then topped by a radical crenellated vase form, and then the two integrated together by these serpentine handle forms. And lo and behold, Frank Gehry ends up designing the Orr Museum. And what do we see? We see a ground floor that is a traditional rectilinear brick structure, but then topped with an eccentric sort of view space at the top, made out of totally different materials. And the two are joined by what? Not a serpentine handle, but a curvaceous sort of stairway. Now, Orr has also sort of come to influence many contemporary potters, among them the ceramist Kathy Butterly. And his rippling surfaces also relate to the science of hyperbolic mathematics, where algorithms expand surfaces faster than the surface is able to spread out. And so that results in crenellated surfaces, for which there are actual algorithms. And images, the first imaging of these concepts, which were very attractive to mathematicians, but confounding because they had no way of visualizing them. Well, finally, one mathematician at Cornell, Dr. Dana Tamina, who was trained to crochet and knit as a child, was sitting knitting a sweater and thinking about algorithms, and she said, I could just use this algorithm to guide my knitting, and vavoom, suddenly we were able to sort of visualize these very, very complex mathematic forms thanks to sort of some yarn and needles. So if Orr's works were made later than the works of Duchamp, Bassioni, all of these other artists, they could readily be dismissed as derivative, secondary sort of works. But inasmuch as Uhr's works were created, however much he was exposed to art, though not that much, created in relative isolation decades before all of these other things. Shouldn't we welcome George Orr into the pantheon of major pioneering visionary American artists? So that's the thought of the day. Thank you very much. Okay. So it's lunchtime, but if you have any questions, Gene and I will be happy to answer them while we're eating lunch here. So thank you for your patience and indulgence. Bye now.
Is call it 15, but say, please be back. If whatever you're doing, we will resume in 55 minutes. Okay, that's right. 5 minutes short of an hour, correct? Yeah. So that would be 1:40. Thanks, everybody.